At times, I'll have to admit, this top 5 greatest players series has felt like a lot, but it felt rewarding. It made it all the way to the letter M, starting with one of 3 teams in a city, starting with that letter, the Miami Heat. They're one of the younger but prouder franchises in NBA history. They started off as an expansion team in the late 80s, and once Pat Riley took over in the front office, first he started as coach and front office executive, then eventually when coach Eric Spoelstra took over, Pat Riley moved into the front office and has been had a major influence on the Miami Heat and shaped the Heat culture, which has won 4 championships in its tenure, has made it to 8 finals. That's a storied history for a team that joined in the late 80s. Still one of the relatively newer NBA franchises, but it's been a nice run. So for top 5 greatest Miami Heat, let's get right into it. If it's your first time catching the series, though, first, I'm only going to use a player one time the entire series. I use LeBron James as the greatest Cav, which means he won't be ranked as an all-time great Heat. Now, if I remove that asterisk, I'd put him at number 2, but that's going to be there, so that's going to change up this list a little bit. But with that being said, we're going to start off with a few honorable mentions. First honorable mention we're going to go with is Bam Adebayo. Now, he's one of the best players of the current Miami Heat. He's been there for 2 finals runs, 3 conference finals runs in the post-LeBron D. Wade era Heat. Now, I have him as an honorable mention because I don't feel he quite cracks the top 5 yet. Maybe one day down the line. But as of right now, he was the guy that helped the Heat get back on track. Then you added another player that helped them make a push for 2 championship pushes and 2 finals appearances, who will be in the top 5. Spoiler alert. But Bam Adebayo has been one of the better players, giving the Miami Heat hope. And now with what's going on with Jimmy Butler, he'll be the guy to lead going forward, presumably. But as of right now, he's an honorable mention. Another one is an honorable mention, Udonis Haslem, longtime Miami Heat. Not a great player, but as the years went along, he became a great mentor and a great locker room leader for the young players. He eventually became that guy at the end of the bench that the young talent went to for advice. And he was excellent in that role. But so Udonis Haslem, well, he's not a great player. He fits the role of a great Miami Heat because he spent years being loyal to that franchise, being a mentor and a positive leader in that locker room. And a pretty solid role player early on. So for that, he definitely at least worthy of an honorable mention. And last but not least, the other honorable mention on this list is Mario Chalmers, who was a good number 2 in the 1 and 2 with him and D. Wade. He was never really a star, but he played his role well. He's a good role player for the D. Wade and eventually LeBron D. Wade led Heat. And he played a role in some of those championship appearances and some of those wins. Not a great player, but at least worthy of an honorable mention. One of the better Miami Heat players of all time. With that being said, let's get to the top 5. I'm going to start number 5 with Jimmy Butler. Because even though now it's gotten ugly as of the time I'm recording this, February 5th, Jimmy Butler's indefinitely suspended, and he hasn't gotten his wish to be traded yet. He's pretty much burned bridges with the Heat, but despite this odd timing, he's at least worthy of being a top 5 Heat player. Because I put the asterisk of, I can't use LeBron twice, I already used him for the Cavs list. Jimmy Butler fits this mold. He came in 2019, signed with the Miami Heat, had an excellent run in the bubble, helped lead the Miami Heat to the finals. 2023 had a good playoff run, leading the team all the way to the conference finals against the Boston Celtics. 2022, excuse me. Then 2023, leading the charge for the Miami Heat. They came in as a number 8 seed. They ended up knocking off the 1-seeded Bucks, beat the Knicks in the semi-conference finals, and the conference finals upset the Boston Celtics and made it back to the finals. Unfortunately, both times they fell short at the finals, but Jimmy Butler was the main contributor to that. His grit and grind style, that dog mentality in him certainly helped out. He usually saved his best for the playoffs, and just for that, he gets the number 5 spot. But because of some of the stuff that's happened recently, and because he didn't have a long tenure with the Heat, going back years earlier, I only got him at number 5. Now, moving on to my number 4, this is where we go, Tim Hardaway Sr. Now, he was originally an all-star for the Golden State Warriors, but I just didn't really have room for him on that list. I feel he fit better as a Heat because he played a role in making the Miami Heat relevant, alongside Alonzo Mourning, who will, spoiler alert, be higher on this list. Tim Hardaway, a multi-time All-Star. He was also an All-Third team in '99. Even though he didn't get the All-Star nod that year, he was still a good player that helped the Miami Heat be a contender in the East. He led them to the #1 seed in 1999. He helped lead them in being one of the competitive teams. Now, the Heat never really got over the hump, and Hardaway Sr. wasn't a great player, but still one of the better players in Miami Heat history. Played a solid role in making that team a contender. Certainly worthy of the nod of being an all-time great Heat, and also had his jersey retired by the organization. Now, moving on to my number 3, I'm going to go with Chris Bosh. Because Chris Bosh, even though he was the third man in that trio in the early 2010s, he was a key part of that team. And he was a key contributor to that championship win. He was the big man up front. He left the Toronto Raptors, came to Miami. And that's what was good. You had LeBron at small forward, D. Wade, Chalmers at the 1 and 2. You had Chris Bosh in there. It was a presence. He was wrecking people. He continued right where he left off in Toronto, one of the better centers of his era, and a key contributor to those Miami Heat back-to-back championship wins. Certainly worthy of a nod. And even the first couple years after LeBron left, he helped keep the Heat competitive a little bit, and he retired as a member of that team. But hey, Chris Bosh, certainly, sometimes his role gets underrated, but he played a huge role in those Miami Heat championship wins. And certainly, I feel based on that, worthy of his Hall of Fame recognition. He put up good numbers as a #1 in Toronto, but he was best suited as a 2 or 3 option. In this case, he was the perfect 3 option for the Heat. And that's why I got my number 3. Now, my number 2, I'm going to go with Alonzo Mourning. He was traded to the Heat mid-'90s. He initially declined his contract extension with the Hornets. Pat Riley saw a window of opportunity. Get his big man. His case, Alonzo Mourning, was kind of his answer to what Patrick Ewing was with the Knicks before he took the Miami Heat job. And Alonzo Mourning fit that role well. One of the better centers of his era. He was the face of that franchise in their first boom period in that mid to late 90s when they were competing with the Chicago Bulls and New York Knicks. Unfortunately, those teams would have the Heat's number come playoff time, but Alonzo Mourning led the charge. He was a great all-around offensive player in the paint, great defensive player, and he was that first real superstar. And not to mention, after a brief leaving the Heat, he came back as a role player during the early D. Wade era. Now, he wasn't a star anymore, but he was a good role player, and he helped the Miami Heat win a championship. So Alonzo Mourning plays a huge role in the first half of Pat Riley's tenure in Miami, both as an executive and coach. He helped the Heat become relevant and become contenders. He helped them in the second boom with the early D. Wade years, helping them win their first championship, not as an all-star anymore, but as a role player. So he also gets credit for that, too. That's the reason I'll put Alonzo Mourning over Chris Bosh, because of his all-around impact on the organization, both as a starter and as a role player. Now on to my number 1. You guys already know who this is. The greatest Miami Heat of all time. Number 3, Dwyane Wade. Taken out of Marquette in the 2003 draft. He immediately came in after the Miami Heat were off 2 mediocre seasons where they missed the playoffs. Led them to the playoffs. Led them to the second round his first year there. And then they added the addition of Shaquille O'Neal, who's not on this list because I had him as an all-time great Laker. And guess what happens? Year 2, they're contenders. Year 3, they're champions. Dwyane Wade, Finals MVP, couple scoring titles. He was the guy that was good enough where he convinced LeBron James to come to the Miami Heat and win more championships. Because without D. Wade, that trio never happens. And let's not forget, with all due respect to LeBron, D. Wade led a championship run first before the super team in 2005-2006. Easily the greatest Miami Heat player of all time, just for the impact he made on that organization. And even during the rebuild before Jimmy Butler, he came back as a veteran and a role player. He did help the Miami Heat a little bit before Jimmy arrived. He helped mold the players that were around them more as a mentor, kind of a father figure type of player in the second go with the Heat, the end of his career. And just, a lot of positive you can say about Dwyane Wade. Easily the greatest Miami Heat of all time. But you guys, comment, let me know who your top 5 Miami Heat are of all time. Make sure to drop a like and subscribe for more content. Coming up next, we got the greatest Milwaukee Bucks of all time. So stay tuned.